You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. After a lull earlier this year, we're seeing a surge of immigration arrests in recent weeks across the U.S. In the wake of two fatal shootings by ICE agents this month, the Trump administration has issued conflicting policies about how officers will conduct arrests. Fears of detainment and deportation remain high among immigrants, especially in Washington's agricultural communities. The situation has pushed some undocumented immigrants to consider voluntarily leaving the United States. It's an act the Trump administration calls self-deportation. A recent story by Range Media documented the journey of one orchard worker based in Sunnyside, Washington, who chose to return to her home country of Mexico. And the story talked about the impact immigration enforcement has had on Yakima County's farming communities. And I'm joined now by the co-authors of that report. Hal Bernton is an independent journalist based in Portland. He reported for the Seattle Times for over 20 years. Hal, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And Daisy Zavala Magaña is a reporter with Range Media. Daisy, thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
So I was hoping that you could first introduce me to the main subject of your story, Flor Sanchez. Hal, who is Flor? And if you could give us a little background on how you connected with her.
Sure. Flor was a real innovator in the apple orchards. She was a crew boss who also was really interested in how to make the job better for her workers and how to work more efficiently. And she developed a tool to help thin the apple orchards. And there was actually a video made about her that featured her work by a nonprofit. So she was a real talented person, the kind of worker that really helps make the apple orchards in the Yakima County one of the most productive in the country. And what I found to be a wrenching story was the fact that she made the decision, the really painful decision to split up her family and self-deport to Mexico this winter due to her concerns about the immigration crackdown.
I mean, Flor Sanchez is married to a U.S. citizen. She has a 7-year-old boy who was born here. She has a 12-year-old boy who was born here. Why did she decide to self-deport? Why was self-deportation the right move for her, according to how she understood her situation?
She had consulted immigration attorneys, and she did have two unauthorized border crossings, her first, and then she had gone back a second time to Mexico to visit her father, and he was quite ill. And the fact that she then crossed a second time made you can sometimes apply for waivers, but they've become very, very difficult to get. And there is a law that was passed actually during the Clinton administration that imposes that 10-year bar. And she was really discouraged that there was any path forward, even though she was married to a U.S. citizen. And her situation is shared by several 100,000 families in Washington State who have a member who is illegal, who is unauthorized in terms of the way they came to the country. And so she's certainly not alone in having difficulties in trying to gain legal status.
Daisy, do you want to add to that?
I think so. While speaking with Flor, it was really clear, because we always talk about how complicated the immigration system is and how it's just really hard to understand. And even speaking with lawyers, they're like, it's hard for me to understand. So imagine an immigrant who's not fluent in English having to navigate all of that. And when I was asking her to kind of describe the legal aspects of it, she kind of couldn't. And thinking back to, she had tried to apply for asylum after, I think it was around 2017 or 2016. And she couldn't describe to me the procedural, what had happened. Even today, she kind of sounded a bit confused about the whole process, about what had happened, why she was denied. and not really trusting that her denial had been fair, which I totally understand. Like if you don't even understand the procedural aspect of it, like the reasoning behind it, like, and then they're telling you, no, like you're requesting asylum because of the violence in your state. Well, there's violence everywhere, but that really doesn't, I guess, resolve, right, the questions behind, like, well, why was I denied? Like, what am I supposed to do? And like, what are my paths? Like, they don't, it's something that I've heard just like time and time and time again from asylum seekers at the border, from immigrants who are undocumented here in Washington state. It's just hard.
The Trump administration, when it talks about enforcement, has really emphasized this idea that it's focused on people with criminal records, people who are dangerous to the community, who, are going to be their top priority to deport. Flor is a longtime farm worker. As you say, she'd been honored for her innovation in the orchard picking process and thinning of young fruit and blossoms. Is she the kind of person that ICE is pursuing right now? I mean, what do we know about what's actually happening on the ground versus what's being said about the priorities of the immigration enforcement tactics?
I think that the enforcement situation in Yakima County over the past year in central Washington generally has shown that certainly people who are working and have a relatively clean record, and maybe they have a speeding ticket or something like that, they're not exempt from being picked up by ICE. And I know Daisy talked to Flora that she had met some people. She knew some people who had been picked up. And when I talked to her as well, that became clear. And so she did not in any way feel she was immune from the immigration crackdown.
And just to add to that, some of our reporting over here at Range, like we've looked into ICE accessing DOL data, and what we've seen is that they're arresting, detaining, and putting people in detention on civil immigration charges, so not criminal.
And Daisy, you grew up in Wenatchee, and you have experience with farm workers in the area. Can you just speak more generally about how important agricultural labor is in central and eastern Washington and what that work typically looks like?
Typically, what I noticed just in my experience growing up is most people don't have even an appreciation for the type of labor that's being done here, or even the knowledge of like what it takes and like who's doing it. And one thing that sticks out is like I was talking to like a former farm worker, and she was telling me, yeah, like during the pandemic, just a couple of years ago, we were the essential workers, and now we're the criminals that this administration is looking for, right? And they're not criminals, generally speaking, right? Like we're seeing just people that are trying to live their lives. You see it kind of play out in making people feel scared to live their daily lives, to go to the store, to go to work even, or even just like engage in the community and even like take their children out for joyful things like to the park, to community events and that kind of thing.
I think it's worth noting also that Representative Dan Newhouse, who is a congressman representing the Yakima region in central Washington, has repeatedly tried to introduce legislation that would create a legal pathway to residency for those undocumented workers in the region. His own family has a hops farm. He's long pushed for that legislation unsuccessfully. He has also endorsed a piece of broader legislation. It's actually got a total of 40 House members, equally divided among Republicans and Democrats, that would offer a legal pathway to undocumented workers in all kinds of industries, construction, hotels, wherever they work, with certain restrictions. It's definitely compromised legislation. There's no citizenship, there's no pathway to citizenship, but it has not gone anywhere in this Congress. The legislation hasn't even had a hearing.
I'm curious if you found in your reporting, Hal or Daisy, is there evidence that more farm workers are choosing to self-deport in the face of this, as Fleur did?
I think that there is that trend. The administration has earlier this year actually put out these sort of inflated numbers of the totals they think are self-deporting. And those numbers were debunked by some analysts. But it is true. And when I talk to sources in Yakima County, there are more and more people who are deciding that this just isn't worth it. This isn't making it. They're not making it, and the risks are now too great. There are also those whose families member have been detained and decided to deport to get out of detainment, and they are opting to join their family member. So between the two, there does seem to be an increase.
I was really struck that Fleur herself didn't even trust what's been advertised from the administration, that she would receive money for self-deportation and that there would be, help getting a plane ticket, things like that. Like, her trust was so low that she didn't want to connect at all to even risk the possibility that instead of being able to choose her own path, she would be detained, right? I mean, that's the level of distrust and fear that we are talking about here. I wonder, Daisy, if you can speak more to this, especially in the wake of the two fatal shootings, one in Texas, one in Maine, the stoppage of the traffic stops by ICE, and then the restarting of traffic stops by ICE. How do these headlines and how do these developments in policy affect the way communities live their lives?
I think to start, there wasn't a good baseline of trust for not just the Trump administration, but really just in general, the government, just because of how long it's been since there's been any immigration reform. But I would say it is obviously heightened under the Trump administration compared to Biden because of all the immigration policies that we're seeing. And now the fatal shootings of recently two immigrants, but even before that, people protesting ICE, that just creates such a shock, I think, in the community that the question kind of becomes like, okay, well, can we really trust an administration that is doing all of that to help us? I think Fleur's concern really was being put in detention. And when people are put into detention, you really don't know how long you're going to be there. And we all know it's been widely documented that the conditions are absolutely terrible and inhumane. There's been reports about abuse, about the food, about other conditions there. And so I think all of those factors played in.
The Trump administration figures for what they call Project Homecoming, which is both financial incentives and a free ticket home. That's what they're offering, is that 72,000 people across the country have taken it. But I was struck, like you, Libby, that Fleur was not about to do that. And of course, her financial resources are really meager. And it's been a really tough thing. I've been talking with her for months now since she made the move, and then Daisy's done more recent interviews. And it's been a real struggle in Mexico. It hasn't been easy for her. She's not working yet, and it's just not been easy at all. And I know that she's working to try to make a new life there, but her heart is still with her family in Sunnyside, Washington, where her youngest son, and her husband reside.
I just want to highlight the tension here in the politics of Yakima County and Central Washington General, like this is the reddest part of Washington state, at least the congressional district where Dan Newhouse sits and he's retiring from is the reddest congressional district in the state. And when I've interviewed candidates who are vying to become the next congressman or congresswoman from Central Washington, most of them support the president's immigration policies. At the same time, they say they do want to, most of them say they want to see something like the Newhouse path to residency. Not all of the candidates, but some of them do. So on the one hand, you have people who are cheering the kind of policies that are pushing Flor Sanchez to self-deport, a agricultural worker, orchard worker who created a new technology, was a crew boss, was, by and large regarded as a very successful orchard worker. And then on the other hand, they're saying, but we want a way for her to stay. Does it feel to anybody else, maybe it's just me, but it feels like we're living in two different realities where this path to citizenship is being talked about, but nothing's being done. And in the meantime, real people like Flor Sanchez are suffering the consequences, and the farms that employ them are suffering the consequences.
I think it's really hard for farmers who feel that way, and I've spoken with some of them, including actually one of them that employed Flor, to speak out publicly, and that the climate has actually gotten, the political climate, more intense in terms of he now gets lots of nasty Facebook posts saying you're hiring illegals and saying, oh, we'll try to get ICE on you. And it's worth noting that one thing that ICE hasn't been doing is actually in the Yakima County area in Central Washington is going onto the farms. Rather, they've been interdicting people on their way to work. But still, the environment is very tense, and it's difficult for people to speak out because of that. And yet, Yakima County is actually majority Latino. If you look at county-wise in terms of the census, and of course, there's plenty of Republicans. And it's worth noting that, too, that even Flor's husband at one point voted for Trump.
Daisy, I wonder if you could just share before we go anything from your last conversation with Flor about how she's doing, about her perspective on all of this.
So we spoke with Flor pretty recently. It might have been earlier this month, just to kind of, prepare to publish the story. And we talked a little bit about her and her family planning to see each other fairly soon. They didn't have a set date, but in the middle of all of that, you could hear in the tone of voice, in her tone of voice, that she was so incredibly emotional just about the fact that they've been separated for several months now since the winter. And only being able to see her 7-year-old son and husband through video call, and the reality that she still has 9, almost 10 years left, right? She's at the very early stages of this sort of exile from the US. And she was just trying to stay positive, though. I think that's what stood out to me during the several times that we spoke with her, and then also with her husband. It's no matter, the difficulty of the circumstances, they both were trying to stay really positive because they were aware that there wasn't really any other option.
Yeah.
If they want to keep moving forward for their kids and for themselves.
Just going to say that I think while Flor's story is unique, it is a window into the kind of tensions that so many families, immigrant families, are facing in Washington State and other states. And I think that's one reason I was drawn to do a deeper dive of reporting to help people understand some of the unseen consequences of the immigration crackdown.
Hal Bernton is an independent journalist based in Portland. You may know him from his bylines at the Seattle Times, where he reported for over 20 years. And Daisy Zavala Magaña is a reporter with Range Media. Thank you both very much for being here and sharing Flor Sanchez's story.
Yeah, well, thank you. I enjoyed having the chance to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you, Libby.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime right here online at KUOW.org, or of course on your favorite podcast app.